Hi, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I want to help bring awareness to this devastating, traumatic evil that we have in our world. It is worldwide. It's not just any particular country. It's not just any particular group of people. Domestic violence affects all people from all walks of life, from all countries. But it's a huge devastation, a huge devastating event that happens in the lives of people. Domestic violence does not only affect those who are inside that household, but it affects many people, far-reaching. Domestic violence can have lifelong effects. So I thought today would be fitting to do the video here, because domestic violence brings death to relationships. Domestic violence brings death to dreams. Domestic violence brings death to families. Domestic violence brings death to marriages. Domestic violence brings death to self-esteem and self-worth. Domestic violence brings death to dreams. Domestic violence brings death to ambitions. Domestic violence brings death to innocence. And yes, domestic violence can bring physical death as well. I want to share a blog post with you that you can find on Mama's Golden Nuggets at WordPress.com. I will put that link down here in the description. But it is called Broken Inside and Out. The picture is really fitting because not only is the heart broken, but it bleeds. There's physical blood, but there's internal blood. You bleed internally, you bleed physically, you bleed emotionally and mentally and in every way. So let me read this to you. Domestic violence. What ugly words. Think about them for a moment. Domestic, home and family. A place where you're supposed to feel safe and loved. Violence. Behavior involving physical force that intends to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something. It is hard to imagine that there are people in this world that would try to inflict harm or death upon their own family members. But what is even harder to imagine is the depth of the damage that is done to the family member or members that are on the receiving end of that violence. There are many statistics out there to show the number of cases of domestic violence in our country and the world, but that is not what I want to talk to you about today. We all know that it exists. I want to share with you some of the ways that domestic violence impacts lives. I want to share with you some of the experiences that are a part of the daily life of domestic violence victims. I'm hoping to stir your heart to get involved in helping to put an end to domestic violence. Fear is a big part of everyday life for victims of domestic violence. Many people find it hard to believe that someone could live in fear every day and do nothing about it. But you must realize that this fear does not jump out all at once. It comes slowly and progresses until it has become torment in and of itself. These perpetrators are charming in the beginning. They appear to love and care about their victim. Of course, a lot of times, the victim has already had a major devastating event or events in her or his life that has pretty much drained much of their self-esteem and confidence. The victims are longing to be loved, as we all are, and these violators come strolling up with all the right words and moves. Once they have secured the relationship, They gradually start increasing their control over the partner and manipulating situations. At the same time, they are chipping away at the last of the victim's self-esteem. Belittle, degrade, and tear down. Can you imagine trying to live every day with everything that you do not being good enough? Try to imagine being told constantly how horrible you are, how ugly you are, how stupid you are, how no one wants anything to do with you, and you try so hard to prove that you are worth loving. You're not sure that you're worth love, but you sure do long to be loved. You want someone to love you, truly love you. And yes, the violator does use this to their advantage. They try to convince you of how lucky you are to have them because they love you when no one else does. Now again, you must realize that this does not happen all at once. These violators are good at what they do. It's like chipping away at the very core support beam of a building. You don't have to break the whole building to bring it down and destroy it. You chip away at the main support beam long enough and that building will come crashing down. Isolation and loneliness. Do you know what it is like to be isolated? And I mean truly isolated. The kind of isolation where even if you are in a room with people, you are still isolated and lonely. Your every move is watched. Who you talk to and where you go are scrutinized. You have to be careful of what you say when you do talk to people. Have you ever been timed going to the grocery store or anywhere? And I don't mean as a game or for fun or as a joke. I mean timed, and if it took longer than they thought it should, you were punished for it. How about 20 minutes to go grocery shopping, and that includes drive time? Being accused of cheating because you spoke to someone, anyone. Can you imagine? They begin to demand more and more time and use guilt as a means to control. They work to quickly isolate the victim from family and friends. Guilt and shame. These perpetrators like to use guilt and shame to manipulate their victim or victims. They blame you for everything that goes wrong in their life, in the home, with the children, and even for problems that they have on their job. They demand so much of you that there is little time to primp and pamper yourself, although you are neat and keep yourself groomed. You are supposed to look like a model at all times. You are to be the picture of Superwoman out in the world, and you are to act like a porn star in the bedroom. You are ridiculed and berated if you don't measure up to their idea of porn perfect. You are punished if they do not receive compliments from people about their wife and family. However, you are punished if they do. You see, they tell you that you are a failure at being a wife, a mother, and as a human being if they do not receive compliments. They want to feel like they are put on a pedestal by the world, and with no compliments, they feel cheated, and the victim is to blame. Getting compliments about their wife and children makes them feel good about themselves, not their family, but themselves. Then you're punished if they do receive compliments because they accuse you of cheating. They work so hard at keeping the victim or victims under a guilt trip so that they keep working to try to make them happy. Sometimes they will even become so depressed about life that they speak of giving up on life or suicide as a means to control the victim. They know that the victim loves them and will try to help them, and they also use it as a means to gain forgiveness for their actions without truly being repentant. Eggshells. Have you heard the expression walking on eggshells? Do you truly grasp what that means? We all know how fragile eggshells are. Now just imagine having to live your everyday life walking on these eggshells so lightly as to not break them. That is what it is like for victims of domestic violence every day. They have to be so careful about what they do, what they say, how they act, and how they react to everything when the abuser is around. They never know what will set the abuser off on a rampage. One day something can happen and it may be said that it's no big deal, but the exact same thing can set them off another day. And I'm not talking about rational things or just getting upset. I'm talking about going off on a violent rampage. Walking on eggshells is extremely nerve-wracking and takes a huge toll on the victim or victims. The above gives you some insight into the mental and emotional damage that these abusers inflict upon their victim or victims. These are not the full gamut, only a glimpse of the internal damages. These examples and many more experiences will take a very long time to heal, and some may never heal. They will improve with time, but some of the damage will be carried for a lifetime. Now let's just talk a little about the physical damage. It is just as real and just as devastating as the other. Most of it just heals quicker. There are some physical damages that can linger for a lifetime as well, depending on the type of physical act. Physical abuse takes many forms, but let's just name a few. There is slapping with the back of the hand. Then there is hitting you with the fist. There is slamming your arm or other body part in a door or pushing you repeatedly into walls or onto the floor. There is hitting you with objects or using objects to inflict torture. There is headbutting you, busting a glass door in your back, or breaking a mirror over your head with a glass ashtray and your face and eyes being filled with glass for days. Then there is trying to run you over with a car or choking you until you hit the floor and are out of it. And let's not forget that there is a verbal aspect of abuse beyond what has already been mentioned. It is when the abuser moves into the elevated stage and threatens to kill you or you and your children. They do usually move in this direction eventually. The thing is, when the victim tries to leave, the abusers step up their irrational behavior in order to try to regain control. They stalk you, taunt you, show up at your work, the children's schools, and your home. They step up the level of threats against you and your life and the attempts to take your life. The victim can get a restraining order, but these abusers usually do not care about these pieces of paper, and unfortunately our justice system does not do a very good job at enforcing these orders nor protecting the victim or victims. The victims and the abusers in domestic violence cases all need help. However, I want to encourage you to stand up and step out to help the victims of domestic violence. If you suspect that someone is being abused, get involved. Don't let it go. Don't sit back and do nothing, and don't judge the victim or victims. They desperately need your help, not your judgment or condemnation. And be forewarned, the victims of domestic violence will not usually fess up to the abuse at first. It may be hard for them to admit it, or they may be in denial, or they may think that it will get better. Of course, this is in the early stages only. Or they may just be too ashamed to admit it, or they may be too afraid. Build trust. Let them know that they can trust you, that you care. And whatever you do, do not betray them. They have had enough of that. Once they feel safe with you, there is a better chance that they will admit the abuse and accept your help to get out. There is no way to truly convey the magnitude of the impact of domestic violence unless you've been there. However, I hope that what I've shared with you will encourage you to get involved and to become part of the solution. Be the help that they need. Be the strength that they need. Be the safe haven that they need. You just may save a life or lives.